Recently, I've been playing Far Cry 5 with my brother, and it's been quite an enjoyable experience. Exploring cult-ridden Montana in an SUV as the radio blares tunes and we help residents in Hopes County feels like a violent road trip, and I'm all for it. It's only during the main story cutscenes where that sense of enjoyment comes to a screeching halt. I don't particularly enjoy Far Cry 5's story. Its gameplay is a delight, but the game's message confused me to a point where it left me frustrated, and it got me thinking about my favorite story in the Far Cry series. Blood Dragon is my absolute favorite Far Cry game, and while I have massive respect for Far Cry 2, my favorite narrative in the series is Far Cry 4. Its story has stuck with me for quite a while because of how realized its characters are and how they reflect off the main protagonist, AJ Gale. The main protagonist in a story is extremely essential. They are the driving force for the plot and usually who we view the story through. A great protagonist is one that is an active participant in the story's events and makes crucial decisions in the narrative. AJ Gale isn't a very charismatic character. You could even make a solid argument that he isn't very appealing in his personality. He's just a guy who's trying to do the right thing in Kyrat, but he doesn't need to be. AJ's original goal is to scatter his mother's ashes in her home country of Kyrat, and more specifically Lakshmana, but is then wrapped up in a political revolution against the royal army, led by the psychopathic and fascinating Pagan Min and the Golden Path, a resistance of freedom fighters that AJ's father Mohan created years ago, currently led by Sabal and Amida. AJ acts as our introduction to this world because, just like us, this is the first time he's ever seen this conflict. His actions in the story are what make him an interesting protagonist. This only works because of how the other characters play off AJ, beginning with the crab rangoon-loving antagonist, Pagan Min. Ever since Far Cry 3, the series has been implementing charismatic villains into its stories, usually depicted heavily in the marketing or cover art of the game. Now, in my personal opinion, I believe that Pagan Min is the best antagonist in the series. To be fair, Voss was extremely interesting and genuinely terrifying. He takes over any scene he's a part of, and you just want to see what he does next. But he's killed halfway through Far Cry 3, and for the rest of the game, you have to face off against Hoyt, who is nowhere near as interesting as Voss. Pagan is around for the whole game, so you get more time to understand him, especially his relationship to AJ. What makes Pagan stand out from other villains in this series is how he views the protagonist. Usually it's based on attempting to stop the hero from thwarting their plans and killing them if need be. But Pagan isn't concerned with killing AJ at all. Sure, his soldiers might try, but right at the beginning of the game, when Pagan finds out they almost killed AJ, he makes it very clear that he is not pleased. Pagan's weapon of choice for AJ isn't any type of firearm, but rather charming him in hopes that AJ will come around and join him. About 10 minutes into the game, Pagan goes off to torture someone who gave away your location. To begin proper, you have to leave your chair and escape, but if you listen to the tortured screams for 15 minutes, Pagan comes back, compliments your manners, then flies you to Lakshmana and spoils the plot twist at the end of the game, triggering an early way to end it. But if you choose to play the game properly and join the Golden Path, Pagan constantly greets you on the radio. In the entire game, Pagan is never angry at AJ, even after he captures his forts, removes his lieutenants from power, and even kills his body double. In the latter example, Pagan is more upset that he lost a body double rather than the fact AJ thought he killed Pagan. After realizing that AJ has grown into an experienced killer, he sacrifices his second-in-command, knowing that she doesn't have a chance against him. Pagan is a cruel and psychopathic villain, but he honestly cares for AJ a great deal. He sees the last thing his mother left behind and is trying to form a bond the best he can. His actions and decisions have broken most of Kyrat and its people, but that doesn't matter to him anymore. He's regressing as a ruler and focusing on something else he considers more important. In that regard, he shares a comparison to Dracula for Season 2 of Castlevania, whose character arc I really admired. I'll share more about Pagan later, but before I do, I want to talk about Amida and Sabal and how they plan to fix a broken Kyrat. Amida and Sabal are at first glance the usual good guys. They're freedom fighters trying to defeat Pagan and unshackle Kyrat. It's only when you examine what both are fighting for that their goals become unearthed as deeply flawed. Let's start alphabetically to be cute. Amida is the first woman to lead the Golden Path. Women are considered second-class citizens in Kyrat, and her belief is to tear down most of the culture for disempowering her and other women. Equality is a great thing, and it's great to have someone fighting for that cause. However, her reasoning behind it is not just for the betterment of Kyrat, but out of spite for the founding men who took women's rights away from them. Her plans and decisions are more realistic and colder than Sabal's, focusing on what can be achieved and paying whatever cost will occur because of it. Her ultimate plan is to turn Kyrat into a drug state, whose natural resource would be opium. She reasons that Kyrat has no more natural resources they can provide to the other countries. For the sake of survival and to have Kyrat prosper, it will provide substances that could harm those partaking in it across the world. And that's not considering how the inhabitants will be affected by this. On the other end, you have Sabal. Sabal is the much more traditional of the two. He served AJ's father Mohan and greatly respected his vision, so speaking to him is the closest AJ gets to see what his father was like. Sabal is idealistic and righteous in his beliefs, refusing to compromise the morals of the Golden Path, and his plans try to save as many lives of soldiers and civilians as possible. But he's someone who doesn't see a problem with girls being married off at the age of 6. He believes the culture of Kyrat should be followed to a T and doesn't acknowledge any of its shortcomings. He doesn't have an overall strategy to make Kyrat compatible with the other nations of the world, rather focusing only on Kyrat itself. AJ is forced on multiple occasions to pick a side on how to proceed with the Golden Path. Whoever's plan is greenlighted will be in charge of the Golden Path until the next plan. And both Amida and Sabal will let you know when you're making the wrong decisions. Amida will tell you how you're dooming Kyrat's future, while Sabal will use AJ's father as a way to guilt trip him. And to be honest, both of them are using AJ. He's a very useful tool and someone who can be utilized to do their tasks. Both of them individually promise that if AJ helps them, he will find Lakshmana. And near the end of the story, whoever is officially the permanent leader, even after defeating their rival, asks AJ to guarantee their power by killing the other. AJ is put in a position where he has to decide who's the best leader for the Golden Path, but ultimately he's deciding more than that. He's choosing what Kyrat will become after Pagan is gone. Both leaders are revealed in the epilogue to be just as corrupt, if not more so, than Pagan back in his prime, taking their causes to such an extreme that Kyrat is shackled once again in a new way. Early on, one of the Golden Path members say to AJ that he is the tiebreaker. The group just wants a decision on who to follow. After all, Kyrat can't be any worse than when Pagan was in charge, right? This conflict muddies the waters on what can be considered a good path to follow, and Pagan's ending speech makes this even more complicated. So Far Cry 4 is an open world game, and some of its activities include missions and collectibles. One of these collectible types is Mohan's journals, which chronicle the start of the Golden Path and end near his death. The members of the Golden Path, and especially Sabal, idolize him as the hero to the cause and the leader they needed. But looking through his journal, you discover that he was like most characters in this game, that being deeply flawed than seen at first glance. How he writes in the later sections mirrors Sabal's scathing fury towards those who disagree with him. Now, the reason I mention this is because in the game's final mission, Pagan offers AJ the choice of learning where Lakshmana is, or the boring option of just shooting him in the head. You can kill him after the revelation, so I held off for the time being. If you choose the former, Pagan directly reveals what your parents have done. So back in the day, Mohan asked AJ's mother Ashware to spy on Pagan, but the two of them grew to respect each other after so much time together and fell in love. Pagan is gay, but that doesn't change the fact Ashware was the only woman he ever loved, and the only person he made a child with. That child being named Lakshmana. When Mohan found out, he killed Lakshmana with no remorse. Ashware returned the favor to Mohan before she and baby AJ left for the United States. Lakshmana now lies in a lovingly crafted shrine made by Pagan. This shrine is where Ashware wanted her ashes to be brought. The righteous leader of the Golden Path and AJ's father is revealed to be just as callous as most other characters in this game. And the fact that Pagan Min, your antagonist for the entire game, who has caused the deaths of thousands of people and who spawned this entire situation of breaking Kyrat, is the only faction head who is honest with you, is a shocking discovery. Before he leaves, he mentions that he's been setting this whole situation up for AJ to become his heir. Putting you in power has been his objective ever since you showed up in Kyrat, and after leaving the shrine, Pagan takes a helicopter and you never see him again. Of course, you could just shoot him with a rocket and blow it up, but after learning about why Pagan did what he did, I couldn't do it. So AJ put his hand up in a wave as Pagan flew away from Kyrat, never to be seen again. Pagan did horrible things and created tremendously harming consequences, but I wasn't seeing the terrible king of Kyrat. I was seeing a man wearing makeup and flamboyant clothing to cover up the fact he didn't want to be that anymore. A man who lost the love of his life and his daughter, and now with the last familiar connection he has left, however loosely bound, sees his heir left with his domain. Far Cry 4 can be a fun video game, but no matter how repetitive it can get or how many towers I have to climb, I eagerly do so because of the context for doing them, and its narrative is so strong, featuring characters that make sense in this world and are more complicated than at first glance, an antagonist with fascinating motives with the protagonist, and a hero who tries to do the right thing in a backdrop where that is a difficult thing to accomplish. I hope future Far Cry games can live up to this quality of storytelling, because Far Cry 4's story is pretty neat. Hey there. Thanks for watching this video on Far Cry 4's narrative. I hope it's been informative or at least somewhat enjoyable. I've got some other video ideas in the works, so feel free to subscribe and click the bell to be notified when those come out, as well as rating this video a thumbs up or down depending on what you thought of it. If you're looking for more stuff to watch, I've got a video on this awesome platformer called Psychonauts and one on Firewatch. My name is Pollymacho. Thank you very much for your time, and I'll see you at the next one. Take care.